Analysis of thought processes. Analysis of planes and consciousness. How many planes are there? Briefly, we have three: sense sphere plane, form sphere plane, and formless sphere. Sense sphere plane. In the sense sphere plane, how many realms do we have? 11. They include the 4 woeful states, the 1 human world, and the 6 celestial worlds. These 11 realms are called the sense sphere plane. In the sense sphere, according to circumstances, 80 types of consciousness or thought processes are obtained. How many types of consciousness are there? 89. We normally talk about the 89 types of citta in terms of 5 sense door thought processes and mind door thought processes. What is bhavanga? It is patisandhi, bhavanga, and kuti. Relinking consciousness and death consciousness are the same, right? We're talking here about the 2 santirana upekkha, great resultant consciousness and sublime resultant consciousness. When we exclude the 9 types of sublime resultant consciousness, then that leaves 80 types of thought processes that are obtained for the sense sphere. See that, right? Why can't sublime resultant consciousness arise in the sense sphere? The 5 types of form sphere resultant consciousness perform their duty in the form sphere only. They cannot arise in the sense sphere. It's the same for the 4 types of formless sphere resultant consciousness. This is why only 80 types of thought processes can be obtained in the sense sphere. Understand that. Beings born in the sense sphere can obtain jhana, wholesome consciousness, right? When an arahant born in the sense sphere world practices meditation and gains jhana, then they get sublime functional consciousness, but not resultant consciousness. This is why in the sense sphere, according to circumstances, 80 types of thought processes are obtained. What does according to circumstances mean? It means that if you cannot gain jhana, then you cannot get sublime wholesome consciousness or functional consciousness. Perhaps you just gain first jhana consciousness. It depends on the person and the circumstances, right? We should know this. 63 Las Vegas Sayadaw Form Sphere Plane. As for the form sphere, how many realms do we have? 16, right? We should separate out mindless beings, though. So, excluding mindless beings, we have 15 realms in the form sphere plane. Among those 15 form sphere realms, 64 types of thought processes are obtained. See the difference? There are 80 for the sense sphere and 64 for the form sphere. What are the 64? They include all types of unwholesome consciousness except the 2 types of dosa mula citta, all types of rootless consciousness except the 2 types of nose consciousness, the 2 types of tongue consciousness, and the 2 types of body consciousness, the 8 types of sense sphere wholesome consciousness, and the 8 types of sense sphere beautiful functional consciousness, but no great resultant consciousness. Just wholesome and functional consciousness. Altogether, that's 64 types of thought processes. Let's talk about these in more detail now. So among the 12 types of unwholesome consciousness, we exclude the 2 types of dosa mula citta. That's aversion, right? Why don't they get aversion in the plane of form? This is because aversion has been inhibited by those born in the form sphere and formless sphere. Since they practice meditation, if they still have aversion dosa, then they cannot gain jhana. There is no dosa in the form sphere or formless sphere. This is why there is no dosa mula citta. 12 types of rootless consciousness can arise. Why only 12? Brahma, born in the form plane, have no nose sensitivity, tongue sensitivity, or body sensitivity. Accordingly, they don't have the 2 types of nose consciousness, the 2 types of tongue consciousness, or the 2 types of body consciousness. That's why we subtract these 6 from the 18 types of rootless consciousness. We were recently talking about according to circumstances, right? If we gain jhana, then sublime wholesome consciousness arises. If we don't gain supramundane consciousness, then no lokuttara, right? If we are still a puthajjana, then we don't have supramundane citta. In the same way, if we were blinded in an accident, then we cannot have eye consciousness. If we're deaf, we don't have ear consciousness. According 64, analysis of thought processes to circumstances, right? So since Brahma have no nose, a tongue, or body sensitivity, they do not have the two types of nose consciousness, the two types of tongue consciousness, or the two types of body consciousness. The 8 types of sensosphere wholesome consciousness and the 8 types of sensosphere functional consciousness can arise. But the 8 types of great resultant consciousness cannot. Why not? Think about the functions of these 8 types of consciousness. They are fourfold: rebirth/relinking, life continuum, death, and tadaramana, registering. The relinking, life continuum, and death functions do not apply in the form sphere. As for registering consciousness, the conditions for its arising are threefold: after sense-sphere jhana, for a sense-sphere being, and with a sense-sphere object. Tadaramana does not arise because of the absence of doors. It only arises when you have the 5 sense doors, as in the sense sphere. But these beings have only the eye door, ear door, and mind door. Tadaramana arises after sense-sphere jhana, but in the form sphere, they have apana jhana, right? They don't have sense-sphere jhana. What types of consciousness are tadaramana? They include the 3 types of investigating consciousness and the 8 types of great resultant consciousness. This is why the 8 types of great resultant conscio, US and ESS, cannot arise in the form sphere plane. The 8 types of sense sphere functional consciousness can arise for arahants. The 5 types of form sphere wholesome consciousness and the 5 types of form sphere functional consciousness can arise, but since we're talking about thought processes, form sphere resultant consciousness cannot arise. The functions of those types of consciousness are relinking, life continuum, and death. Since we're talking about sublime resultant consciousness, these functions do not apply in terms of thought processes. The 4 types of formless sphere wholesome consciousness can arise in beings born in the form sphere. If they practice meditation and would like to gain the higher formless jhanas, they could potentially gain those 4 jhanas. As for the 4 types of formless sphere functional consciousness, they can arise for arahants. Lastly, those born in the form sphere can gain enlightenment there too. For that reason, the 8 types of supramundane consciousness can also arise. Altogether, that's 64 types of thought processes for the form sphere plane. 65 Las Vegas Sayadaw. Now, we go to the formless sphere plane. Formless sphere plane. We have only 4 realms in the formless sphere plane. In this plane, only 42 types of thought processes are obtained. They include 10 types of unwholesome consciousness. Again, there's no dosa mulasita. 1 type of rootless consciousness, manodvaravajana, mind door adverting consciousness. The 8 types of sense sphere wholesome consciousness, and the 8 types of functional consciousness. The 4 types of formless sphere wholesome consciousness, and the 4 types of formless sphere functional consciousness, and 7 types of supramundane consciousness, no sotapatti maggasita, as it altogether. That's 42 types of thought processes for the formless sphere plane. Let's look at these more closely. There's no aversion in the formless sphere plane, right? This is because aversion has been inhibited by those born in the formless sphere. Among the 18 types of rootless consciousness, they get just the 1 type. Why? The remaining 17 types include 7 types of unwholesome resultant consciousness, 8 types of wholesome resultant consciousness, pankadvaravajana, and smile-producing consciousness. These beings do not have bodies. When there's no body, there's no I, right? This is the formless plane. No body. If there's no I, then there's no I consciousness. If no ear sensitivity, then there's no ear consciousness, no nose consciousness, no tongue consciousness, no body consciousness, right? As for the 1 type of pankadvaravajana and the 2 types of receiving consciousness, sampatichana, we call these manodhatu. Manodhatu takes the 5 objects, and the 5 objects don't exist in the formless sphere, so they can't get this. With respect to Santidana, it has 5 functions. These functions are not performed in the formless sphere. Since Pankadvaravajana is based upon the five doors, eye, ear, nose, tongue, and body, beings without a body aren't concerned with this. Similarly, smile-producing consciousness cannot arise in a being lacking a body. 66 Analysis of thought processes. Since beings born in the formless sphere have no body, there is only Manodvaravajana among the 18 types of rootless consciousness. The 8 types of sense-sphere wholesome consciousness can arise for Puthujjana, stream enterers, once-returners, and non-returners. The 8 types of sense-sphere functional consciousness can arise for Arahants. Why don't formless sphere beings get form-sphere siddha? Beings born in the formless sphere have temporarily inhibited the desire for rupa. After they gain formless sphere jhana, they don't have any more desire for form sphere jhana. This is because it's lower than theirs. When you get a BA or an MA degree, do you want to go back to high school? Of course not. As such, these beings have no desire to gain form sphere jhana. They've already moved beyond that. This is why there is no form sphere siddha in the formless sphere. And as for the 8 types of supramundane consciousness, there is no Sotapaddi Magga Chitta. Why not? To attain the first stage of sainthood, one must hear the Dhamma from another person. But these beings don't have ears. Without an ear, they cannot listen to Dhamma instructions on how to practice meditation to gain enlightenment. It's for this reason that formless sphere beings cannot gain the first stage of Magga. As for Sotapatiphala, on the other hand, a formless sphere being who had attained stream entry in the previous life could have this citta arise. What this all means is that a worldling being born in the formless sphere cannot gain enlightenment. See? After their lifespan in the formless sphere is finished, they will be reborn in the sense sphere plane again. The Buddha encouraged his followers to practice meditation to gain enlightenment. Let's say you haven't gained enlightenment and are still an ordinary, worldling person. Perhaps you practice samatha meditation and gain jhana. If you're very skilled at samatha meditation, you might even gain all the jhanas, all the way to the highest level, Nevasanya-nasanyatana. After you die, you'll be reborn in the highest formless sphere realm. Even though you'll be reborn in such a high realm, after your lifespan is over, you will have to come down to the sense sphere and be reborn as a human being or a deva in heaven. From there, though, you may die and be reborn in hell. See? It's not sure, because you haven't gained enlightenment. For example, we might take something and throw it up in the air. As much as we have the strength, the item may go high up into the air, but when the power runs out, the item comes back down. 67 Las Vegas Sayadaw. What do we need to do? We need to practice Vipassana meditation to become a stream enterer and close the door to the woeful states. Then, if we want to practice jhana and experience the different realms, that's okay. In any case, we won't have more than 7 lives before we reach parinibbana. Otherwise, if we're still a worldling person, even if we're reborn as a deva in heaven or in the highest Brahma realms, what the future holds for us remains uncertain. So we need to practice meditation to gain at least the first stage of enlightenment. This person should be tihetuka. This means that our relinking consciousness should be tihetuka, right? It should be accompanied by non-attachment, alobha, non-aversion, adosa, and non-delusion, amoha. If so, we can gain enlightenment. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. We've now learned about planes and consciousness, which thought processes can occur in which planes. Now I would like to go back to analysis of persons and citta. We just finished discussing beings born in the sense sphere, but now we will explore the form sphere and formless sphere, and how they are different. Puthujjana. How many kinds of puthujjana are there? There are 4 kinds. How many are there in the form sphere? Let's look. Of the 4 kinds of puthujjana, the first is dugati ahetuka. This type of puthujjana cannot be born in the 16 form sphere realms. Why not? Because these beings are reborn in the woeful states. The second kind of puthujjana is sugati ahetuka. They also cannot be reborn in the form sphere. There's no Brahma that's blind or deaf. Right? The third kind is a Sugati Dvihetuka being. Their relinking consciousness is conditioned by two roots. In order to gain jhana, though, you must have three roots. Among the four kinds of Puthujjana, only a Tihetuka being can be reborn in the form sphere. A Sugati Tihetuka Puthujjana has a rebirth consciousness conditioned by three roots. How many types of consciousness can arise for a sense sphere Tihetuka being? 54. For a form sphere Tihetuka being, though, only 10 types of Akusala Chitta can arise, no Dosamula Chitta, right? For a 68 analysis of thought processes Brahma, only 11 types of rootless consciousness can arise. They cannot get the 2 types of nose consciousness, the 2 types of tongue consciousness, or the 2 types of body consciousness. This is because they have no nose, tongue, or body sensitivity. They can get the 8 types of sensosphere wholesome consciousness but cannot get resultant consciousness in the form sphere plane. Also, functional consciousness is only for arahants. They can experience the 5 types of form sphere wholesome consciousness and the 4 types of formless sphere wholesome consciousness. So, 9 types of sublime wholesome consciousness. How many is that? That is 38 types of consciousness that can arise for a Tihetuka being born in the form sphere. This is the most possible. If the being gains only the first jhana, then there would be fewer that can arise, right? What about for a Tihetuka being born in the formless sphere? We have 4 formless sphere realms, right? A formless sphere Tihetuka being can be reborn in these realms. How many types of consciousness can arise for them? They can get the 10 types of unwholesome consciousness we just talked about. Among rootless consciousness, only Manodvara Vajjana, the 8 types of sense sphere wholesome consciousness, and the 4 types of formless sphere wholesome consciousness. That's it. They can't get form sphere consciousness because they have no desire for form sphere jhana. Altogether, that's 23 types of consciousness that can arise for a Tihetuka being born in the formless sphere. Last week I talked about how 63 types of consciousness can arise amongst all Tihetuka persons. That's just adding the 9 types of sublime consciousness to the 54 types of consciousness that can arise for a sense-sphere Tihetuka being. We're just discussing it in more detail now. Now let's look at Sotapatti Tihetuka. Sotapanna. How many kita can arise for a Sugati Tihetuka, Sotapanna, or a stream enterer born in the sense sphere? 50. How many types of consciousness can arise for a form sphere Sotapanna? Amongst unwholesome consciousness, how many can arise? Only the 4 types of Ditthigata Vipayutta and the 1 type of Uddaka can arise for a stream enterer born in the form sphere. How about rootless consciousness? The same 11 that we just talked about can arise. Also, they can have the 8 types of 69 Las Vegas Sayadaw sense sphere wholesome consciousness, and as many as 9 types of sublime wholesome consciousness, depending upon their jhana. Since we're talking about a stream enterer, the 1 type of Sotapatti Phala Sitta can also arise. So how many is that for a stream enterer born in the form sphere? That's 34 types of consciousness that can arise. Now how many types of consciousness can arise for a stream enterer reborn in the formless sphere? They can have the same 5 types of unwholesome consciousness amongst rootless consciousness, just Manodvara Vajjana. The 8 types of sense sphere beautiful wholesome consciousness, the 4 types of formless sphere wholesome consciousness. There's no desire for form sphere jhana, right? And the 1 type of Sotapatti Phala Sitta. Altogether, that's 19 types of consciousness that can arise for a stream enterer reborn in the formless sphere. Now, we'll go to Sakadagami. Sakadagami. How many types of consciousness can arise for a once-returner born in the sense sphere? The same number as for a Sotapatti. If you're talking about the form sphere, it'll still be 34 types, and for the formless sphere, it'll still be 19 types. Anagami. What about for a Sugati Tihetuka Anagami, or a non-returner born in the sense sphere? How many types of consciousness can arise? 48. If you know this much, then it's easy to remember for the form sphere and formless sphere. With regard to the form sphere, there are just the same 5 types of unwholesome consciousness as before. How about rootless consciousness? The same 11 we've been talking about. There are also the 8 types of sense sphere wholesome consciousness and the 9 types of sublime wholesome consciousness. Plus, there's the 1 type of anagami phala citta. Altogether, that's 34 types of consciousness that can arise for a non-returner born in the form sphere. See how it's the same number as for a stream enterer and a once-returner. The types of consciousness are the same, except for the last one. A stream enterer can have the 1 type of Sotapaddi phala citta, 70 analysis of thought processes, whereas a once-returner can have the 1 type of Sakadagami phala citta. The number of types of consciousness that can arise are otherwise the same, and it's the same for non-returners. So in the context of the form sphere and the formless sphere, for stream enterers, once-returners and non-returners, the numbers of types of consciousness that can arise are the same. Understand that, right? 34 types can arise for the formless sphere, and 19 types can arise for the formless sphere. Just substitute the last one. Instead of Sotapaddi phala citta, it's just Sakadagami phala citta or Anagami phala citta, right? Arahant. How many types of consciousness can arise for an arahant born in the sense sphere? 44. What about for a form sphere arahant? Well, there's no wholesome or unwholesome consciousness. How about rootless consciousness? Of the 18 types, we can remove the 2 types of nose consciousness, the 2 types of tongue consciousness, and the 2 types of body consciousness. That leaves 12 types of rootless consciousness that can arise. The 8 types of sense sphere functional consciousness, the 9 types of sublime functional consciousness, and the 1 type of arahata phala citta can also arise. Altogether, that's 30 types of consciousness that can arise for a form sphere arahant. As for a formless sphere arahant, the only types of consciousness that can arise include 1 type of rootless consciousness, manodvara vajjana, the 8 types of sense sphere functional consciousness, the 4 types of formless sphere functional consciousness, and the 1 type of arahata phala citta. That's a total of 14 types of consciousness that can arise for an arahant who was born in the formless sphere. All this stuff we've been talking about here has been for your knowledge. We can't find it in other scriptures, only in Abhidhamma. Only here can we find it in such detail. Soon, we'll be studying the 31 planes of existence and where beings will be reborn after they die. We can know exactly how that process works. 71